South of Delhi lies Agra, heaven. Agra was the capital city from the 16th to the 17th century. It reached the height of its glory under the successive reigns of the emperors Akbar, Jahangir, and Shah Jahan. The latter ordered the construction of the Taj Mahal in 1631 before transferring the capital city to Delhi. Today, Agra draws millions of tourists due to its majestic and famous mausoleum. Among the 20,000 people who worked on the construction site were master artisans from Europe and Central Asia. The head architect was Usad Ahmad from the city of Lahore. Seen from the gardens, the majesty of the Taj Mahal is beyond impressive. One walks slowly, as in a dream, towards this tomb of white marble, enshrouded in a cloudy mist that accentuates its magical appearance. The gardens were designed to reflect the description of paradise, with its 4 rivers of water, milk, wine, and honey. The tomb's central dome is surrounded by 4 identical minarets. All in all, 28 types of precious and semi-precious stones were used in the calligraphies and inlaid motifs displayed on the white marble. This sublime white marble mausoleum arose from Emperor Shah Jahan's passionate love for his wife Mumtaz Mahal, which is Persian for Light of the Palace. She died on June 17, 1631, while giving birth to their 14th child. Devastated by her death, he wanted to give her the greatest homage possible. Thus, this majestic and poetic monument. Listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, the Taj Mahal is the leading tourist attraction of India, drawing in 2.5 million visitors annually. Left of the Taj Mahal is a red sandstone mosque that stands in stark contrast to the Taj Mahal's white marble. The Jama Masjid Mosque was built in order to sanctify the site and serves as a place of worship for pilgrims. To its right, an exact replica of the mosque maintains the complex's architectural symmetry, but this edifice is not used as a mosque since it does not face Mecca. The arches frames and the tympanies are covered in white marble. The tympanies are entirely covered with stone-inlaid floral arabesques. The mosque and the pavilion's design are identical. They both consist of a massive oblong prayer room with 3 rows of vaulted ceiling. The passages of the Quran that are calligraphied on the walls of the Taj Mahal are apparently intended to characterize the site as the reproduction of paradise. A true allegory of Judgment Day when the dead come before God and God tells them, "You, peaceful soul, be among my servants and enter into my paradise." Near the gardens of the Taj Mahal stands the Red Fort of Agra, a significant Mughal monument from the 17th century. With its perimeter walls spanning 2.5 kilometers, this powerful citadel made of red sandstone contained the imperial city and a great number of palaces. Established as a capital city by the Mughals, Agra necessarily needed to have its own red fort. And from the fort, the Emperor Shah Jahan could contemplate the Taj Mahal, where his beloved wife rested in peace. Like Delhi's fort, the fort in Agra stands as one of the greatest symbols of the Mughal emperor's grandeur, which reached new heights under Akbar, Jahangir, and Shah Jahan. Behind the surrounding walls, Jahangir Mahal Palace was built by Akbar for his son Jahangir. It is a combination of Central Asian and Hindu architecture. The Red Fort's monuments mark the peak of an Indo-Muslim art form with strong Persian influences. The imperial citadel thus contains a large number of fairy tale-like palaces, such as the Taj Mahal, the Shish Mahal, the octagonal tower, and the audience halls built under the luxurious reign of Shah Jahan. Two very beautiful mosques can also be seen within the palace complex, one of which is the Pearl Mosque. Diwan Ayam, the public audience hall, was added to the Red Fort by Shah Jahan in 1628. The flat roof is supported by 3 rows of beautifully decorated and sculpted pillars. This is where the emperor heard his subjects' complaints while seated on silken carpets, and where he received his ministers while gazing elsewhere. He dreamed about his bereaved and beloved wife. Located at the center of the southern hemisphere, between the equator and the Antarctic, South Africa's temperate climate varies from one region to the next. It was Jan van Riebeck, the country's first governor, who ordered vines to be planted on South African soil in the 17th century. However, even if South Africa is one of the few countries able to trace their first wine harvest back to 1699, the early colonists were by no means great wine lovers or connoisseurs. It was not until the government of Simon van der Stel, who later gave his name to the wine-growing region of Simonsburg, that South African wine really started to fulfill its potential. Since then, its reputation has spread worldwide. The wine region, which centers around Stellenbosch, is packed with estates much like this one, the Constantia. The estate houses are magnificent, with typical Cape Dutch architecture. Located within the vineyards of Stellenbosch, the Verheligen estate is laid out along the slopes of Helderberg Mountain. Its wines, especially the reds, have acquired international reputation. The estate, which was one of the first in South Africa, has continued to evolve and develop with the help of top professionals and experts in the field of enology. Over time, it has been redeveloped, improved, and adapted to follow European models, and it is now a benchmark for the wine-producing estates of South Africa. Bought out in 1985 by an Anglo-American company, it represents a perfect combination of modern technology and ancient knowledge. The best wines are aged, here as elsewhere, in French oak barrels. On the other side, in the Table Mountain Reserve at the heart of the famous Simonsburg region, is the Delheim Estate, founded in the 1930s by some passionate wine lovers. The terrain is one of undulating hills, ideally situated at the foot of the mountain. Thanks to years of research and experiments on soil characteristics and grape varieties, Spa Sperling has succeeded in blending some truly fantastic Cabernet Sauvignons and Merlots. Stellenbosch is known for its vineyards and the wine route that runs through it, but even more importantly, it is famous for its typical Cape Dutch architecture and gabled roofs. A number of French winemakers have eventually settled in the fertile lands of South Africa. In 1990, Anne Cointreau, a descendant of the family behind the liqueur of the same name, bought the old estate of Morgenhof. She restored it fully, and then, when South Africa's tourist trade opened up after the abolition of apartheid, opened it up to visitors. Since then, thanks to its lovely French garden and excellent restaurant, the estate has become a prime attraction on the South African wine route. In fact, 1/3 of the estate's annual turnover is made through wine tourism. Thanks to the work they did to restructure and improve the vineyards and the warehouse, one of the estate's wines was classified Best New World Wine. At the end of the wine route is Franschhoek, in English, the French Corner. It was here, after the Edict of Nantes was revoked in 1685, that the first Huguenot refugees, French Protestants fleeing France at the end of the religious wars, came to settle in 1687. After their ship laid anchor in Capetown, they were attributed lands in the region by the governor van der Steen. Here, the route is dotted with vineyards with French names, La Provence, l'Allée Bleue, La Motte, Haute Cabrière, but the newcomers integrated so fully that no one speaks French here anymore. Franschhoek is a neat and calm Afrikaner village. Visitors come here to sample some of the huge range of wines, all very well suited to accompany classic French cuisine, as well as to visit some of the fantastic winemaking estates, such as the estate of Boschendal. Boschendal makes some excellent Chardonnays and Sauvignons, as well as other good non-export wines. These producers, amongst others, are fighting to preserve traditional production techniques rather than the bulk production favored by the cooperatives. South Africa is the 8th largest wine producer in the world. Its harvest is estimated at 8 million hectoliters of wine from 100,000 hectares of vineyards, an area slightly smaller than the wine-producing area of Bordeaux in France. In Mexico, the city of Oaxaca is located in the country's central valleys, on the foothills of the Sierra Madre. The capital shares the same name as the state, and Oaxaca is an enchanting city. Oaxaca has many museums and impressive religious buildings, among which is the cathedral. The cathedral's construction began in 1535, but because of earthquakes which occurred during the works, was only consecrated 200 years later. Dedicated to Our Lady of the Assumption, the Baroque facade is made of grayish-green stone common in the buildings of the city. The main door is framed by San Pedro and San Pablo. In the middle of the facade, in carved stone, is an image of Our Lady of the Assumption on clouds. Above this is a chalice presenting the sacrament of the Eucharist, and at the very top is the Holy Spirit, seen as a dove facing forward, with a light coming from behind its open wings. The cathedral towers were restored in the 20th century, after yet another earthquake. The public library of Oaxaca is in a house dating from the end of the 17th and the beginning of the 18th centuries. It is a perfect representation of the city's civil architecture. We see a pretty patio with greenery and reading rooms all around, with one that is specifically for periodicals. Its 5 rooms house over 6,000 publications relating to politics and history. A city of pilgrimage, Oaxaca is filled with churches, one more beautiful than the next. Santo Domingo's church, built at the end of the 16th century, has a Renaissance-inspired facade. At the entrance is the family tree of Saint Dominique de Guzman, founder of the Dominican order. Nuestra Señora de la Soledad is a church dedicated to the patron saint of the city, Our Lady of Solitude. A vision of her was seen right here. This 17th century church has a superb sculpted facade making its altarpiece. Built between 1682 and 1697 by Father Fernando Mendez, this Baroque-style church in carved stone resembles a dressing screen. Inside, the building has many valuable pieces of art, be it paintings, sculptures, religious pieces, an organ from 1686, a handsome Baroque altarpiece made of gilded wood. 2 barrel vaults atop the building, as well as angels, seem to levitate over the congregation. Where the vaults meet, there's an octagonal dome. Throughout Mexico, there are many devoted followers, and the churches are filled for prayer as soon as they open each day. This profound devotion is most sincere, and some say that it is this faith and prayers that save the world from the constant threat of chaos. The construction works for the San Felipe Neri Church and its additional building in 1733 and ended in 1773, when it was consecrated to Our Lady of San Felipe Neri, founder of the congregation of the same name. Inside the church is a series of golden altarpieces considered to be the most remarkable in the city. San Felipe Neri is an extraordinary artistic witness to the Baroque period from the end of the 18th century, when 2 opposing architectural tendencies coexisted. One was austere, reserved, and respectful of the current ideals. The other was flamboyant and imaginative, seeming to be without rules or restraints. A touch of history. It was here in 1841 that Benito Juárez, the famous indigenous Mexican president, was married, having passed the law of the separation between church and state. We find the same layout in this church of a Latin cross, with vaults that come together in an octagonal center. On the altarpiece, the Virgin Mary looks over San Felipe Neri. The city of Oaxaca has an impressive amount of colonial buildings located right in the heart of the city's historic center. The Institute of Science and Art has a Renaissance facade. This beautiful 18th century house was transformed into a university during the 19th century under President Juárez's initiative in order to let learning help liberate the country. This university, now transformed into a museum, has a very large collection of books, most of which come from the former monasteries in the region. The city contains several parks and public gardens, many of which were once lands belonging to the church. Around the former convent of Santo Domingo, an ethnobotanical garden was created with hundreds of species of plants, all native to Oaxaca. The first construction plans for the convent date from 1551 and were the work of the Dominicans. All the same, it was only in 1608 that the convent of Santo Domingo was opened, even though it was still not finished. 2 earthquakes in the beginning of the 17th century destroyed the former convent. 4 years later, it was officially inaugurated, and in 1623, it was declared a university where philosophy and theology would be taught. The convent is very sober, even archaic, within the Baroque kingdom that is Mexico. The interior courtyard, with its monumental fountain and aisles, has an almost medieval feel to it, and all remains intact. For over 2 centuries, the monastery was inhabited by monks, and then, in 1812, it was occupied by armies during the Mexican War of Independence. Today, the convent houses the Regional Museum of Oaxaca, with a large collection telling the history of the city. Founded in the 3rd century BC by the Greeks, the ancient town of Jerash reached its apogee under the Romans in the 2nd and 3rd century AD. Going past Emperor Hadrian's Arch, we come to the Hippodrome, built at the end of the 2nd century during the Severan dynasty. The Hippodrome was equipped with 10 starting gates, caceres, and could hold 15,000 spectators. The chariot races were a great highlight in the cultural life of Roman cities. We enter the town through the south gate. Caravans from Arabia would have arrived at this gate. Several gates have been discovered among the remains of the ramparts, but only the north and south ones are well preserved. The inscriptions inform us that more than a dozen divinities were worshipped in the town. But only the remains of the sanctuaries to Olympian Zeus and Artemis, his daughter, are still visible today. The site is dominated by the sanctuary of Zeus on the eastern slope of the hill. Jerash's development was boosted by an economic alliance, the Decapolis, 10 towns in the region, as well as a period of general affluence in the area. During this prosperous period, Jerash boasted paved streets with colonnades, immense temples, theaters, vast public spaces, fountains, and fortifications complete with towers and grills. It was all carefully planned and laid out. As well as these remarkable buildings, there was the actual town of Jerash. The architects of the day designed the town according to plans which had already been tried and tested in other ancient towns. Today, the site of Jerash is considered to be one of the best preserved archaeological sites of the Roman Empire. The town reached its prime under the Romans, but underneath the Roman ruins lie those of the Greek city, and above them those of the Byzantine era. After many centuries lying hidden under the sand, excavations on the site started 70 years ago. On the Cardo Maximus, a route lined with the most elegant buildings of Jerash, is the Nymphaeum, a sacred fountain dedicated to Tyche, the goddess of chance. In the beginning, the whole thing was mounted on a demidome. Its existence and its monumental proportions testified to the opulence of Jerash. A grand water feature cascaded down in the middle of the Corinthian columns into a large basin, then ran into various pools. We're in the town South Theater. This superb structure was built under the reign of Domitian at the end of the 1st century. Around 4,000 spectators would enter through the 2 gates. They used tickets made of clay discs. Only men were allowed to occupy the first 29 rows of the tiers. In the front rows, we can still see traces of the Greek letters that were used to designate places. What is incredible here is the quality of the acoustics within the theater. A spectator sitting in the back row of the tiers would have heard equally well as one sitting in the front row. An incredible feat of acoustic engineering. The other major temple is the Temple of Artemis, a Roman temple built in 150 AD under the reign of Antoninus the Pious. This is no doubt the city's most important monument, partly because of its significance as the temple to the patron goddess of Jerash, but also because of its proportions. The whole construction spreads over a length of almost 650 meters. With a rise of more than 40 meters between the lowest and the highest point, this was a stunning architectural backdrop for the playing out of a symbolic and mystical journey. Processions would start at the river and travel up to the temenos. The portico of the building consisted of 12 Corinthian columns. They are so tall that on a windy day you can see the pillars swaying. 11 of them are still standing. The Temple of Artemis was intended to be the most beautiful and the most important temple in ancient Jerash. It contained panels of fine marble and a beautifully decorated cult statue in the cella. Only the best sufficed when honoring the town's patron. Despite the lack of written records about the history of Jerash, archaeological research enables us to unravel the tangled web of events. Scientists have discovered that the site was occupied as long ago as the Bronze Age, because here, generation after generation of men have left traces of their existence in the earth and the rock, from the most sober to the most exuberant. The Château of Chenonceau belongs to the group of chateaux that were known as the Château of the Loire Valley during the French Renaissance, when the royal court often moved to this region away from the capital. Built in 1513 on an old medieval base by Thomas Boyer and his wife Catherine Brissonnet, embellished by Diane de Poitiers, then Catherine de Medici, and saved by Louise Dupin during the French Revolution, it is also called the Château of the Ladies. Thomas Boyer and his wife undertake numerous construction projects, beginning the transformation of this property and its metamorphosis towards what we see today. We can access the ground floor by a staircase followed by a little bridge. Diane de Poitiers, the second important woman of the chateau, was François I's confidant and would go on to be the mistress of his son, Henry II. She exerted a strong influence on this king, whom she loved sincerely, even though she was 20 years his senior. Under his reign, from 1547 to 1559, she benefited from numerous honors and gifts, most notably the Château of Chenonceau. With the death of Henry II in 1559, his wife Catherine de Medici will take revenge on her rival and the king's mistress, Diane de Poitiers. Catherine would construct on Diane's bridge a gallery that would form a unique and world-renowned reception hall, and that gives the chateau its current-day appearance. With a length of 60 meters and a width of 6, it was used as a ballroom and was inaugurated in 1577 during festivities hosted by Catherine de Medici and her son Henri III. Catherine de' Medici is an emblematic figure of the 16th century, but her name is permanently linked with the French wars of religion fought between Catholics and Protestants, and her role in the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, which makes her a controversial figure. She has been negatively portrayed as a bad-tempered and power-hungry woman who would stop at no crime to hold on to her power. But today, we do, however, consider her as one of the great queens of France. In the main building, 2 16th century Italian cabinets were moved in. This is the old study of Catherine de' Medici during her reign as regent, and we can make out 2 intertwining C's, which was Catherine's logo. Through her marriage with Henry II, Catherine de' Medici became the Queen of France and the mother of 5 future kings and queens: François II, Charles IX, Henri III, Elizabeth of Spain, and Marguerite de Valois, known as Queen Margot. We now enter a room in the chateau dedicated to the 2 daughters and 3 stepdaughters of Catherine de' Medici, the 5 Queens' bedroom. On the walls, we see a series of Flemish tapestries from the 16th century depicting the siege of Troy or the crowning of King David. After the death of his 2 brothers, Henri III succeeded to the French throne and ended the reign of Regent Queen Catherine de' Medici. The splendor would continue in the royal resort that was Chenonceau, and the court still liked to visit and be a part of the king's entourage. But Henri III would be assassinated in 1589, and the history of the chateau would continue to be marked by the women builders or owners. Amongst them, Louise de Lorraine, the king's widow, whose bedroom on the 2nd floor mourns the death of her husband. She would live there until her death, surrounded by nuns who lived at Chenonceau, transforming the chateau into a type of convent. But life continues, and thanks to the fabulous hunting grounds, the court continues to frequent the chateau. The red living room was redecorated for the arrival of Louis XIV on July 14, 1650. This living room, draped in red, possesses a collection of portraits from the French 17th and 18th centuries. Amongst these, there's the ceremonial portrait of the Sun King by Rigaud, with a frame sculpted and gilded by Lepôtre and made up of only 4 huge pieces of wood. There is also a portrait of Madame Dupin, who would save the chateau during the French Revolution, and a magnificent canvas by Rubens depicting the child Jesus and St. John the Baptist. Next door is the room belonging to Gabrielle d'Estrées, the sulphurous mistress of Henri IV. The walls are decorated with tapestries whose sketches are by Lucas de Lede and Lucas van Nevel. The chimney, the floor, the furniture, the canopy bed, all Renaissance. The Château of Chenonceau is comprised of 2 main gardens, the Diane de Poitiers and Catherine de' Medici gardens, situated on either side of the Marc Tower. It is therefore the succession of different owners that has led to the chateau's famous image that we know today. Set with several gardens that are florally decorated each season, a park and a vineyard, it is the most visited private historical monument in France, with 850,000 visitors each year. The Gustav III Airport in St. Barthélemy reminds visitors that the island was under Swedish rule for 100 years, starting in 1784. Christopher Columbus discovered the island and named it thus during his second voyage in 1493, in honor of his brother Barthélemy. He then claimed the island for Spain. The island's original Caribbean name was Guanolo. With its unfertile soil and very dry climate, the island does not present much economic potential, but it is nonetheless a strategic spot in the northern Lesser Antilles, due in large part to its naturally protected harbor and carénage. The port of Gustavia, the island's main city, is made up of two sections: the commercial port at l'Anse du Public and the marina in Gustavia. In 1648, believing it worthless, Spain abandoned the island and it became occupied by the French, who came here in a discontinuous fashion. In 1784, France traded the island with Sweden in exchange for entry rights into Göteborg harbor on the Baltic Sea. The strategic stakes of the time. 1 century later, in 1877, St. Barthélemy was definitively retroceded to France. In the 50s, the billionaire David Rockefeller purchased real estate on this hidden Caribbean island, and St. Bart's, as it is called here, began morphing into a high-end tourist destination. This touristic development, which is very recent, put an end to the poverty that reigned in the island. It is the main sector of activity. From the retrocession of the island in 1877 to recent times, French public services have been quasi-absent from the island, leaving the residents to their own self-administration. In 2007, St. Barthélemy became an overseas collectivity with greater autonomy. The island is committed to promoting its cultural heritage and its exceptional quality of life, which is a source of pride for the island's residents and a source of joy for its visitors. The island has a population of 9,000 inhabitants, who are also commonly called the St. Barts. The majority of them descend from French colonists. Those of African heritage left the island after the abolition of slavery in 1847. St. Barthélemy is an island in the Lesser French Antilles, located 230 kilometers northwest of Guadeloupe and 25 kilometers southwest of St. Martin. It is a mountainous island made up of volcanic rock, around 20 square kilometers. Its coastline spans 32 kilometers. The island's economy is primarily based on luxury tourism and construction. Also, St. Barthélemy has a free port status, that is to say, it is devoid of customs duties. This facilitates certain transactions and attracts capital. Luxury hotels have set the bar here in the high-end sector. A mere 60 years ago, Gustavia and its surrounding area was a small town consisting of decrepit houses around the harbor. At that time, there were only a few Swedish buildings in ruins, 2 or 3 shops, and a few houses. In the early 80s, to deal with an influx of tourists, the municipality began establishing touristic infrastructures. And over the years, Gustavia has become a truly modern city devoted to tourism. The island's lack of natural resources prevents any kind of industry, but it hasn't affected the inhabitants, who are known for their morality, spirituality, and work ethic. The island exports fish, salt, strawworks, and indigo. St. Bart's has a jagged coastline, and its numerous white sand beaches make it a popular destination. The surrounding sea is an ideal playground for water sports like jet skiing, kayaking, windsurfing, surfing, and diving. The island is surrounded by many islets, among them Chevreau Island, Coco Island, and Forchou Island, which is a major marina. The coastline's natural environment is also a valuable natural resource, with 51 coral species and sea grasses. Since it takes less than a half day to travel the island, people come here to relax, to swim, and for some luxury shopping duty-free. An agenda that is worth any other when the surrounding nature is so beautiful. Because they did not want their island to be taken over by hordes of tourists, in the 60s to 70s, the people of St. Bart's opted for a more privileged clientele. For the time being, that choice has proved fruitful. Having become a true paradise for millionaires, St. Bart's makes no concessions, to the great joy of a privileged few. Jerusalem in Israel holds a central role in the Jewish, Muslim, and Christian religions. The Old City is surrounded by ramparts. You enter through 8 doors placed in the wall. It is made up of 2 predominantly Arab quarters, known as the Christian Quarter and the Muslim Quarter, as well as the predominantly Armenian Orthodox Quarter and the predominantly Jewish Quarter. In this city, many religions, people, and social and economic groups mix. For the Jewish people, Jerusalem has always been a holy city, but it has been sanctified by Christians and Muslims for centuries. It's not surprising that Jerusalem stirs emotions, both locally and worldwide. Jerusalem is more than just a rich catalog of slices of history, modern and ancient. This city is also a snapshot of Israel, with a population coming from the 4 corners of the globe. For Christians, the Church of the Holy Sepulcher is not merely a church. It is a sanctuary around the site of the crucifixion of Jesus, including the grotto where Christ's body had been placed after his death. Inside, the stone of anointing is where Jesus' body was prepared before his burial. The religious complex hosts the stone on which the cross was planted. Containing Jesus' tomb, these sites are considered very holy for many Christians from around the world who have been making pilgrimages here since the 4th century. The site of the Holy Sepulcher after Jesus' death became a place of devotion for Jerusalem's Christian community. But it was later hidden, buried by dirt on which a pagan temple was built. It was the Emperor Constantine the Great who ordered that the site be resurfaced in about 325 AD. According to tradition, the Bishop Macaire of Jerusalem told Constantine of the place where Christ had been crucified, and spoke of the miraculous recovery of the tomb during excavations. The emperor began the construction of a vast Christian complex. The pilgrims recorded the following facts in 333. Here, at present, by order of Emperor Constantine, has been built a basilica of marvelous beauty, lined with reservoirs from which we can draw water. And behind it, there's a basin where little children are baptized. The province of Palestine earned the title of Holy Land for the Christians. According to Catholic religious traditions, the Via Dolorosa, the path of suffering, is the path Jesus walked to his crucifixion. The Stations of the Cross retrace the story of the last moments of Jesus' life, from his appearance before Pontius Pilate, to his judgment, to his execution, to his death, to his resurrection. We can also visit St. Anne's Church, of Roman architecture. According to the Gospel, Christ cured a paralyzed person on this site. The Church of the Flagellation was built on a site erected by the Crusaders. Today, it is led by the Franciscans. The church has remarkable stained glass windows showing Christ being whipped and Pontius Pilate washing his hands. The floor of the church is considered to be part of that on which Pontius Pilate placed his chair to judge Jesus, and on which Jesus began to bear his cross. We see how Jerusalem holds a central role in Christian religion. But here, whether Catholic, Jewish, or Muslim, everyone lives at his or her own tempo in this city, certainly separated, but coming together on a daily basis. East of Jerusalem is the Mount of Olives, a hill which is in fact two hills. For Catholics, the summit of the mount is the site of the ascension of Christ 40 days after his death. It was here that he left his friends and disciples. The site is important to three monotheist religions. It is also the place of the oldest and largest Jewish cemetery. According to Jewish tradition, the Messiah, whom they still await and who will bring about the resurrection of the dead, will first come to the Mount of Olives before entering Jerusalem. Those buried here will thus be the first resurrected. At the foot of the Mount of Olives, there is also an Orthodox church in which we find the tomb of the Virgin Mary. It belongs to the Greek and Armenian churches and, according to tradition, hosts the tombs of Jesus' mother Mary and her husband Joseph. In a garden close to the walls, there seems to be the tomb where Christ was buried after his crucifixion and where he was resuscitated. It is a very holy site for Christians. In fact, Jerusalem possesses the genesis of the Catholic religion, inviting the pilgrims into its walls. Jerusalem is a cosmopolitan city, filled with faith that guarantees a voyage in space and in time. It is the capital of the State of Israel and the largest city in the country. It is the symbol of paradoxes, both cultural and religious.